Hello and welcome to This Week of the Movies. I'm Matt,
I'm Eric.
and we are celebrating Saturday the 14th. Oh, is that not a thing? I guess.
Yeah.
Well, in honor of yesterday, Friday the 13th, the big release this week is a horror movie, the remake of Speak No Evil. And honestly, having seen it, Eric and I might agree that the scariest thing about it is that you paid to see it.
ah.
This new film stars James McAvoy, Scoot McNairy, Mackenzie Davis, among others. It is a remake of the longtime classic from way back in 2022, also called Speak No Evil. That is a Danish film that's still primarily in English. So, of course, it needed an immediate English language remake. But if you've seen both versions, you will know that there are quite a few differences here. Eric, with his profound commitment to excellence, has actually seen both versions. I read a full plot synopsis of the 2022 film, so I am very well aware of what is different between them. So we'll talk about the original a little bit here today, too. But in this movie, basically, it reinforces the idea that you should not make friends with strangers on vacation. And if you do deign to talk to those people while on vacation, you certainly shouldn't go visit them in their everyday lives afterward, because people are different kind of people on vacation. We've had the comedy version of that with Vacation Friends that, sometimes makes it seem like it works. This one decidedly does not work. Scoot McNairy and Mackenzie Davis are an American couple that are on holiday in Italy. They're going through a bit of a rough period personally and professionally, but they are trying to get themselves together. But they have a very different approach to vacation, a little bit of an iciness, and that is why Scoot McNairy's character Ben, his eye is caught by another couple that is vacationing. I guess are they British, Welsh? I don't know if they actually can play. I get
Uh
sort of confused about all
I
the
want to
titles.
say
I think Welsh.
Welsh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Played by James McAvoy, who plays Patty, and Aisling Francosi, who plays Sierra. They seem to be having a great time with their little son Ant. Pretty soon, these two, combine. They share their love. They're being put off by another Danish couple that's there that only wants to talk about their cooking classes. That helps them to bond. And it ends with an invitation by Patty and Sierra for them to come visit in their little countryside cottage. So back in the big city of London, still struggling with lack of jobs, lack of relationship and emotional spark. They get a postcard invitation to head out to the country. Ben convinces his wife Louise that they should go and take their daughter Agnes for a nice weekend away, because when you don't have a job and haven't had a job and have no prospects, you surely need to take as many vacations as humanly possible. So a perfect setup for this. They head out to the country, and to say things are awkward might be the understatement of the century. There are a lot of red flags for me. There were a lot of red flags for Louise, who's played by Mackenzie Davis, but despite it all, they managed to stick it out. And shock of all shocks, these people are not who they claim to be, and the situation is a lot more grim than they first suspected. Things go off the rails, and they are forced to fight for their lives. Eric, my initial letterbox review was that this was kind of boring and awkward, then super cringy, then incredibly predictable. I am giving this thumbs down. Uh, I was not really kidding when I said the scariest thing about it might be that you paid to see it. This is not one to run out to see in theaters, in my opinion. Uh, Nor does it seem like the concept was one that you need to seek out the original either. I thought this was. We've had a great year for horror films. This is not one of them for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Eric's so upset that he's choked up this week.
Yeah, it retroactively made me sick since Tuesday. It echoed into the past, trying to warn me.
Echo some.
Um, Look, I don't know who out there is going to be able to watch this, and I don't know who among those fit in this wide range of people, from the people who seem to think that the original is some biting artistic satire with some truth to it that is so insightful on human nature, all the way to the people who think that this movie, you're just thinking too hard about it and that it's just fun and that James McAvoy should do it. All of you are wrong. These movies are awful, destroy each other, and they are awful in the way that I often get irritated about the most, and that is in destroyed potential. So there is a line in both versions of the movie, and I'm going to stick close to the American one because that's what we're talking about right now. The line is "because you let us." In the Danish version, that skews directly to this: "because you were home." The vibe is very much the same. This movie stands as a concept that what they were doing in the original is not entirely original, which loses its justification for doing what it's doing. Now, this version it absolutely makes no sense that they say that line. And because nobody let anyone do anything.
I feel like some of these lines are just callbacks.
Yes, whether they make sense or not, because by this point in the movie, the characters have been completely blindsided, and when they did, they acted as appropriately and smart as they could. In fact, they win the day. So it's not like there's any of the commentary left from the original that is trying to be like, talk about like human nature and politeness and how the like aggressive, like brutal nature of some people is going to take advantage of like a modern society middle class way of trying to live civilly and be polite. There's none of that, in favor of just like having James McAvoy and I think Mackenzie Davis stand as madman and she hero and kind of butt heads on their family units. Scoot McNairy as Ben is pretty much the character lifted straight from the Danish movie. But now he's set in a movie where every other character has been souped up and Americanized and over-explained, and their characters have been fleshed out into being something totally different than they were. So he's just there. And it is very, very difficult to sit there. I think maybe I shot myself in the foot by watching the Danish version. I think I might have enjoyed, like, there's definitely one stretch of this movie that I enjoyed. From the moment that their daughter has finally revealed to the parents what is going on, and I know I can say that because the obnoxious trailer that's been played so many times that everyone and their grandmother jokes that they're glad they don't have to see it anymore, they ruin that something evil and insidious is going on.
Oh yeah, they totally give it away.
So, the exact nature of what I'll stay mute on because that's, I don't know if people are going to watch it, whatever. But the stretch from the moment the whole family knows, through getting their car tire fixed, through climbing to get Bunny, all the way to the gate where they finally just tip the balance and do the one thing with the kid, I am completely sold for what the movie is trying to be. I am completely on board for this ride where it's just like, it is the downfall of the nature of these characters that they are going to turn around and help, and because of that, they are going to like be harmed or experience horror. And that's it. It's just a tiny window, and it's that in the American one. It's like a 5-minute window of the movie that I think is like, oh, that's the whole reason you made the movie. Well, then you only managed to do it in this 5 minutes. And I'll talk about the original. But like, the rest of the time is just spent doing the same thing that agitated me in the Danish one, which is dangling these enticing and interesting character concepts without actually writing a movie around them that does anything interesting with them. James McAvoy is the closest you get to where they made a very interesting character for him to run around and have a playground in. And
but do you think it's that they created an interesting character, or that he's so good that he elevated some of the material? Because judging by what I see from the rest of it around, I think it's his magnetic performance. And we've seen him be intimidating and creepy before. I think that was one of the things that made Split work.
Yep.
So I honestly, I almost feel like it's him. And you do point to that one sequence, which I thought was also good, but it makes, he has this hunting experience with Ben, where when they're talking about hunting, he says he doesn't even really like the kill. He likes catching the prey and getting it. And you can see there was a couple of good moments from Scoot McNairy in that sequence too, where Ben is remembering that and knowing that everything about this tire and the bunny being on there is playing into what gets this guy off.
Yeah. I stand by.
He's terrified and concerned, but still knows he has to go forward, that he has no choice.
Yes, I completely stand by that sequence for this movie proves that there was a movie worth making. That then makes the rest of the movie feel like a failure.
So I'm guessing you were thumbs down as well.
I'm one thumbs down on this version because I think if you have not seen the Danish version and you like James McAvoy, I think most people are going to be okay with this.
Well, and I was one thumbs down too, because I don't think it's horrible or a disaster. It's not Night Swim,
Yeah, it's not The Crow.
It's just, well, I actually didn't mind The Crow.
Oh yeah, okay.
Well, like is a strong word. I didn't think it was horrible. I just don't think it works that well. And what's interesting to me, having read the description, so obviously we saw a very similar version of this in 2022 with I think, what is it, a Danish and a Dutch couple, and I can't I'm probably showing my ignorance, but I don't know 100% the difference between what.
I think
they're two different countries up in the.
Yeah, no, I've heard it compared to like different Netherlands, states in the U.S. Yeah, it's just cultural differences. It's
So having read the description and you've seen the movie, I saw some discussion between some of my fellow critics who had seen both versions, and their commentary was it almost felt like the new version, the American version, was meant to be a winking nod to that, and meant to turn some of the, because of the reversals they make on some things, that they were trying to make jokes out of the things you were expecting if you've seen the original, which I think is fine, except then, I read that afterward and I was thinking back to my own viewing experience, and they don't exactly play correctly then if you don't know that this is a winking nod or a reference. Like when they have the back and forth, I thought you were a doctor, and he goes, well,
I'm not a doctor.
If you know about what happened in the original, it is actually a reveal that the guy wasn't a doctor and that he had made that up. But in the American version, they start to go down that way as a joke, and then, oh, of course I'm a doctor, I'm going to patch you up. So there are some other winking nods, but I think probably the biggest difference, as you said, is the ending, which I mentioned to you, it reminds me a little bit of a horror thriller that I like better, which is The Wicker Man. When what's striking about that movie is some of the depravity and the darkness of the ending, which when they remade it with Nicolas Cage, and that's actually a British movie. So again, a movie in English that didn't have to be, that was Edward Woodward and Christopher Lee. We didn't need to remake it with Nicolas Cage a few decades later, but I thought they sapped some of that energy and menace when they remade it, which is one of the reasons the remake completely flops. This we went with I mean, it's almost, did Spielberg touch up the screenplay for the remake? It's like, oh no, we can't go down a completely dark road. Not to say there isn't some darkness with the kid and the rock at the end. That was a little grim,
Yeah.
but I mean, not as grim as what takes place in the original film.
Again, I point to the girl with the dragon tattoo. Okay. And I know a bunch of people who like the original would just like turn their noses and be like, but of course Americans think there has to be a hero that saves the day. But screw you. This is the exact concept of Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, is that the evil that has been allowed to lives because the guy is like a spider who is able to gradually capture victims, because he's like they always come in because it'd be impolite to say no, and then he like traps him in his basement and he does what he does to him. That's horrible. It is Between the Strangers and the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Speak No Evil is nothing original whatsoever. You've seen it, you just haven't seen it with this much nudity and this much brutal violence and this much lack of realism. And that's my problem the most, is when I see a lot of positive reviews talking about this movie being a satire that tells a truth, or that there is some sort of realism to the plot. No, I would like to point out that the American version, as dumb as it is sometimes, in making commentary on the original, it just points out things that are dumb or satirical about the original and pokes holes in it. Like, for example, the characters are not doctors or anyone. They own this property and live on the land. How? How do they manage to do what they do without working, without doing anything? The guy genuinely does not believe in work, okay? Okay, well, there's a bare hint here. There is a community that enables them to do what they're doing. And in a deleted or not filmed sequence in the original, it's exposed that there's actually a community around that living space where people do this to couples. But in the American one, they start going into all these details like, oh, they're having them wire money and lay fake trails to prove how they disappeared. And they're having to do all of this work in order to make their plan work just for one couple in a household, as opposed to a whole community where like the babysitter is in on it and the guy in the town. And the American one, the babysitter's apparently not in on it. But like it doesn't make any sense in order to stand up and then be the satire that it says it is. And it drives me crazy that people say that it does. And then there's the big conceit. There's the big "because you let us" argument, which this drives me absolutely crazy. Bunny, who they make a super big deal about in the American one, and make the girl have like a pathological like breakdown when she doesn't have the doll. No. In the original, it's just a doll she's close to. She leaves it at the house when they all try to leave. And she can't find the doll. Okay? But what has happened is the James McAvoy equivalent, that character, has complimented the father for finding the doll for her back when they were on vacation, and talked about what a hero he was to her for getting that back for her. And he's appealed to his ego. So there's this moment where the dad is like, oh man, I got to turn around and go back and get the doll. And it'll just be me going to get the doll and whatever. And that's how they end up caught back in this conversation that causes them to stay. What happens though is when they go back in the Danish version, the girl finds her doll under the seat of the car.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh my gosh, I had it with me the whole time.
So they tricked themselves into going back almost.
They tricked themselves into going back. So the whole conceit that everything that's happening in this movie is because the characters have this fatal flaw is muted for me because when the characters had the opportunity to leave, they did everything right and left. And it just so happened that the girl mistook where her doll was. Right? So any argument you can make that like, well, maybe like they forgot the doll because they're not like careful about teaching their daughter and packing this, that, and whatever. No. Like, and then there's another incident that happens where essentially in the third act, they decide that the father and the mother are not even characters anymore. They don't even actually care about anything other than being sad and crying anymore. And they just accept their fate. And I mean, they hard accept their fate. The mom tells her daughter in her arms, nobody's going to get you while I've got you. And then sits back and nobody is restraining her. One guy grabs her around the head to hold her still while they do something horrible to her daughter. But they just pull the daughter out of the arms, and then with the door wide open and no one holding her, she just sits there and goes, no, and waits for the door to be closed on her, and then starts banging on the door instead of the person next to her who just took her kid, and just waits while they drive away. It's supposed to be satirical in the sense that like, oh, the people are helpless and do this kind of stuff. But it is just stupid. Like to me, it is. And I don't understand. Every positive review I read of the movie, someone is projecting massively on like, oh, it says this about society. I'm like, no, you say this about society. The movie laid the barest thread. There's something in there. So I said it was the 5-minute sequence in the American version. In the Danish version, it's the entire first 2/3 of the movie that prove that there was something you could have done. It's the ending that atrociously betrays like the concept that they're leading up to. Like mostly because I couldn't totally figure out what the Dutch family wanted from the Danish family until the twist happens. Then I'm like, what? Like it's bizarre. But there's this interesting thread of toxic versus modern masculinity and class disparity and maternity and like those roles and all these ideas, but then the characters in the Danish one are so flat except for the two male heads of the family that there's almost nothing to it. But in that weird sense, in the way that people aren't constantly showcasing their personalities and trying to entertain people, they feel a little more naturalistic as like real people. Whereas in the American one, everything is blown up and everything is a little bit dramatic and everything is performed. But then the characters are a little more explained and rounded out. But none of it justifies its existence. It's just bleak. I mean, as much as they try and dance around it, it's just the equivalent of some kid on a playground who's like, look, I found a cool new way to torture a bug. I think you want to see that bug die. I'm like, no, there's nothing inherently appealing to me about doing that. And it's just like, oh, how devastating and deadpan. Nope, I've seen The Strangers, a movie that Americans, like by and large, don't like.
That's what I was going to say. So you likening it to that explains to me there was not a lot about this concept that I liked. I did not care for the original Strangers, and when they remade it, I was like, nope.
Yeah.
I don't want to go back to that well. And you know what? It did so poorly. I'll be curious to see what the box office is for this, because you are correct. Like, people had a visceral reaction to the trailer, which seemed to be everywhere for 6 or 7 months leading up to this. That I don't know helped it. There's marketing that helps, there's marketing that hurts, there's marketing that's neutral. I think this was marketing that might have hurt.
I want to know the experience of someone who didn't see the trailer, because they go to such lengths, even though there's uncomfortable things happening the whole time, they go to such lengths to have James McAvoy and his family explain what is going on and then apologize profusely when they do something wrong, that I feel like even though you would know something's wrong with the family, you would be completely blindsided by the reveal.
Yeah.
And
Well, the depth of what the reveal is.
right.
They
Like,
just-
you know, there's something.
They almost
but
just
then,
seem like stage 4 clingers for a while.
yeah. Oh, and this irritated me. Like, there was a little thing that they did, and I don't know if they did it on purpose. And if they did, ha ha ha, good for you. Here's an attaboy. But when they're all standing on the rocks in the American one, and they're like, hey, make sure you jump past the rocks. Otherwise, you're going to get brutally messed up. Immediately, my brain was like, oh my gosh, they're going to do what they did in the Danish one, but they're going to make them drop straight onto the rocks. Like, I started like the relationship between the two movies kept carrying me ahead of the American movie in a way that was, I think, much more interesting than what actually happened. But it like,
yeah. Well, if you were in love with the original, you may like the new one. It seems like if you really liked the original, you will be put off by some of the changes that were done based on conversations I've seen. And if you never saw the original, you may not even understand some of the winking nods they threw into what feels like just a terminally awkward situation. And maybe the problem is some of those European countries are more polite than we are, because watching some of these things, I'm like, there is no chance I'm sitting through any of this.
Yeah.
Red flag after red flag. And I guess they tried to showcase that with Mackenzie Davis's character, who like 2 minutes in,
right.
like,
she's like constantly,
we should be bouncing here.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the lengths some lonely men will go to find a friend. That's why I'm glad I have you for these Saturday morning chats.
Hey,
I don't have to go to any strange Welsh countryside manners where I'm going to get ganked. So that'll put probably a wrap on Evil. Next week we will be going something decidedly different, not only going back to Transformers, but an animated version of Transformers. And I have to tell you, I was completely out when I originally saw the trailer, but some of the reactions to this had me a little bit curious. So I am interested to see how this one hits. Be seeing that here pretty soon. Should be a lot of fun, but something to look forward to next week. Until then, I would say people you meet on vacation, be wary of their country homes and long weekend invitations. You never know what kind of creepy basement you're going to end up in. So,
and also be careful that you're not bringing more to art than is actually in the art, because then they will American remake everything and it will suck.
If you do, even despite all this last half hour, want to see the original Speak No Evil, it is streaming on Shudder and also on the service Hoopla, which all you need is a library card to access. I know, let me explain to you. Libraries are these repositories of books that you can borrow for free that are run by the government. Library cards are free. I know, it's 2024. I'm the same as you. I was like, Hoopla, oh, all you need is a library card. I'm like, well, that rules me out. But those are ways to check it out. The new Speak No Evil is now making its way through theaters. We'll see what its box office total is. Until next week, when we meet to discuss some animated Transformers, we will see you guys at the movies.